Welcome back to Donghua Recapped. In today's video I will be recapping Uncharted Walker. It begins when we see a guy in a dream-like world saying that he is falling towards the endless darkness. His name is Ning, and he wakes up in a prison cell. Behind the wall is a girl's voice telling him to help. He sees a wall of spikes behind him, and she tells him that the wall can move. On cue, the spikes charge toward him, but they soon stop. He desperately looks for a way out, but she tells him that the door cannot be opened from the outside. So he tries to break the bars instead and gets sent tumbling backwards. She freaks out because he can't do anything about their doom, and he tells her to stop playing a prank, but then sees through the hole that it's a girl crying her eyes out. Her name is Jean, and Ning becomes more sympathetic, and she explains that the wall moves every couple minutes, so he tries to keep her calm, spotting that she has an axe, but she points out that there's no window for her to use it on. He tells her to pass him the axe so he can use it on his window, and she tells him to make a promise of death that he'll come back for her. The walls start moving again, and he makes a noble promise that he won't leave her behind. She calms down and passes the axe to him, but the blade gets stuck. Despite their best efforts, they can't get it in the hole, so instead she tries to break the wall, but the axe blade dents because the wall is granite. She continues to cry, so he tries to cheer her up by saying he'll be her first kiss. She says that she was sleeping on the subway and woke up on an iron bed. The mention of the iron bed piques his interest, and he instructs her to break the bed and give him an iron bar to use on the window. He says that he'll break the rotting roof to get her out. So she heads over to the bed with the axe in hand, and passes an iron bar through the hole after cutting it off. He takes it and puts it in between the bars in his room, trying his hardest to pry the window open, and then it eventually breaks, narrowly escaping the blades of the wall. He climbs out. She starts to panic as the wall edges closer. We see a flashback of when Jean was in some snowy surroundings with her friends, and one of them suffered an ankle injury. He gives her a flower and sings her praises as she tends to his injury. Two more people in the group of friends head towards them and talk to Jean in private, saying that everything is covered in snow and that they need to find a way to climb down the other side. They sinisterly say that they have to leave the injured boy behind, explaining that one person dying is better than them all dying. He overhears this and is understandably annoyed with them, but she doesn't go with them and instead stays with him. She continues to tend to his injury, telling him that she believes that everything will be forgiven by God in times of famine, and says that she is going out to get some more herbs, but he stops her and says that she is very nice, before asking if she will be his girlfriend if they survive. She jokingly rejects him, and then walks off into the wilderness. When she gets back, he isn't there and the wall has been written on, saying everything will be forgiven by God. We go back to present day where she is crying and freaking out, swearing and saying that all men are the same until Ning breaks through the ceiling, taking her by the hand and helping her up. She hugs him tightly, apologizing for not trusting him, and then introduces herself. He ignores her and looks around, telling her that they're in the middle of nowhere. She jumps off of the roof, landing on him, and he tells her to lose weight. They notice that they're on a lighthouse, so they get the iron bar and use it to open the hatch. He climbs down, and she closely follows. Tensions rise as they notice some of the ladder is missing, and he jumps to get to the other side, telling her to also jump. She reluctantly does so when he catches her in his arms, but the moment doesn't last as the ladder completely breaks, and they fall. They plunge into the water beneath them. In his mind he says that he feels so powerless, and mysteriously says that maybe it is karma. She helps him out and tells him to wake up. She carries him onto land, and begs that he doesn't leave her on her own. She takes a break before carrying him into a worn-out building where there is a security camera, as well as a strange-looking figure hidden by the darkness. She finds a light switch and turns it on, revealing a dead, rotting corpse. A guy walks up behind her, and she is terrified. He pulls a knife on her, making her put Ning on the floor. His name is Jiang, and he thinks that it was her who caused him to be there, but she says she doesn't know anything, and tells him that her and Ning had to escape a death trap. He says that he'll question Ning instead, so he stomps on his foot, and also threatens him with the knife as he wakes up. He asks him if he knows Jean, but he says no, so he goes to stab him, striking fear into him and making him cry as he insistently denies that he knows who she is. She thinks that the head injury could have changed his brain age. Jiang questions why their answers are different, and she tells him that they fell into the sea from a big height, and the initial impact was on the back of his head, which could have compromised some of his basic functions. He still thinks that they're people that a gangster sent to kill him, and she begs to know what would stop him from using the knife. So he tells her to tell him in one word why Ning was so willing to sacrifice himself for her. She freaks out and thinks that she'll be killed and become mummified over the course of 20 years, which prompts her to ask him how long he has known his closest friend. He tells her that he has friends from an orphanage he was at when he was younger, and she asks him how many of them would save him, as well as if the length someone has known another person is really the best criteria to save someone. At first he still wants to stab Ning, but then he realizes that none of his friends would be willing to sacrifice themselves like Ning did, so he lets her get to work on treating him since she is a major in medicine. Ning is confused by the entire situation and says he can't remember anything, telling them that the last thing he remembers is reading a book in the 5th grade. Jiang tells him to open his eyes, threatening to kill him, which makes Ning open them and beg like a child. Jean heads over to the dead body, touching it and asking how is it possible for a mummy to be in the room when it's so humid, eventually coming to the conclusion that it was placed there. Jiang cuts the shirt and it reveals that the body has a number carved into the chest. The numbers confuse them, and Jiang says that it will take a lot of brain work. She asks him to introduce himself properly, and he says that he works for an Eastern gang, explaining that he was messed over by one of his rivals, so he had to escape by boat. He gives a possible theory about his rival being the one who kidnapped them all, but Ning says that the room they woke up in as well as the numbers on the guy's chest suggest it's more like an adventure game. She notices a scroll on the mummy's ear, so she takes it out. To their surprise, it's a map of the island. Ning says he seems to remember seeing it somewhere, but doesn't specifically know where, which makes Jiang freak out at him. But she takes him somewhere else and asks him in private. He repeatedly says his head hurts before passing out, and she falls asleep next to him. So Jiang heads outside to smoke a cigarette and remains suspicious about Ning and Jean not being who they say they are. Morning comes and he wakes them up, telling them that they're leaving and going to the X on the map. He explains that he doesn't trust them still, and that they will do what he tells them to do, otherwise he will kill them on suspicion of them working against him. They head through a forest, but he brings them to a halt, finding out that in front of them is a hidden spike trap with blood on it. She says that it's a good thing that another person is there, but Jiang shuts her down, saying that she shouldn't be so naive and willing to trust a total stranger. He lays down some ground rules about how they'll survive there, and says that because they're his slaves, they will have to collect food and water every day for him. Ning finds some mountain strawberries whilst Jean collects some mushrooms and herbs, and then they spot a rabbit. She tells it to run to its mother, but Jiang throws a knife into it, saying that they will eat it. They go to a cave and cook the rabbit, so he eats it whilst they watch until he tells Jean to make a bed for his master. He tells Ning that he is allowed to eat some meat and then heads into the cave, telling Ning not to come and otherwise he will be killed. Whilst eating, he overhears Jean screaming. Jiang has her pinned down whilst she screams and struggles, but then Ning comes inside despite the previous threat, telling him to let go of her. Jiang kicks him in the head, which knocks him down, but Ning tells him that he doesn't fear death. Despite wanting to hurt the gang member, he says that they're a team and explains that they all have different skills that they should take advantage of. Jiang doesn't care though, as he punches him again before leaving and telling them to sleep together in the cave. He sits by a tree and thinks about how they can't be his rival's minions, and then his train of thought is disrupted as he hears shouting in the distance. They tell him that it wasn't them shouting, so all three of them hide behind some bushes, seeing a guy running and asking for help before falling into the trap. Jean is confused as to why they let him fall in the trap, and they explain that the one chasing him is the real threat. A guy carrying an axe approaches the man in the trap, and despite his pleading, he rises the axe and brings it down on him before dragging him away. But that's where this video ends. I hope you enjoyed the video. and I'll see you next time.